What I wanted to get into today, I feel like there's somebody on the Alabama defense that doesn't get enough love. And to be honest, when you've got 11 starters and you've got somewhere in the area of about, I don't know, 16 guys that can rotate on the defense. I mean, we're talking about 8 or 9 guys that are contributing on the defensive line alone. I mean, that's a pretty high number as far as guys that provide depth and can rotate in on this defense to consistently and always keep this defense fresh. It's easy to overlook some names, right? But we get excited about who's next. We get excited about who's going to be the most dominant players and those sorts of things. And hey, I'm guilty of it too. This isn't a shot at anybody. It's just a recognition of somebody that deserves some love 11 days away from the Alabama Crimson Tide opening up against the Miami Hurricanes in Atlanta, Georgia. That's Chris Allen. We talk a lot of edge rushers on the show, but we tend to focus a lot on the freak that wears number 31, the Terminator, Will Anderson, right? And justifiably, he could feasibly be the best. We talked about it yesterday on the game. He can feasibly be the best player overall in college football this year. The stats would have to line up for him to be in contention for a Heisman Trophy or whatever, but that trophy is really not an indication of who the best player in college football was. It's who's the most marketable guy that happens to play an offensive skill position. And usually that would mean a quarterback. It's difficult for running backs now, and the fact that a wide receiver won it last year, that's an anomaly. First time in 30 years, that's not something that's normally going to happen either. And how often is the best player in college football a defensive player? How often is the best player in college football an offensive lineman? Those guys don't get enough love. And it's fair to want to focus on Will Anderson, though, when you're talking about a guy that could feasibly hold that type of recognition in college football. A guy who is going into his sophomore season with one more sack than Chris Allen and less tackles for loss, but led the SEC in quarterback pressures. That guy is a first-team All-American, justifiably so, absolutely deserves it. That guy is number 10 in the ESPN Top 100, justifiably so, absolutely deserves it. That guy gets all the accolades, and he deserves it. Will Anderson's my favorite player on the team. Period. But the guy across from him helps him to such a degree that he cannot be overlooked. The guy across from him is a senior leader on this football team and provides the experience necessary to allow you to trot Will Anderson out there as a freshman confidently. Chris Allen is a vital piece for this Alabama Crimson Tide defense. I was very, very tough on Chris Allen last year heading into the season and through the first few weeks of the season. Wasn't crazy about how he was going about setting the edge because oftentimes they didn't feel like that was really the case. Wasn't overly impressed with his pass rushing technique. I felt like weeks 1 through 4, it was the Will Anderson show, and Chris Allen was nowhere to be found. He was not a supporting actor, none of that, right? That's just what I saw. But then slowly, and then very, very quickly, as the season started to close down in the postseason, Chris Allen turned into this monster who set the edge on everybody, who was a fierce run defender, led the SEC in tackles for loss, guys, 13. His 6 sacks, by the way, because he improved as a pass rusher as well as the defense started to mature throughout the season and become what it is today, honestly. His 6 sacks were tied for 4th. I mean, what's a guy got to do to get a little bit of respect? His stats back it up. But yet, here we are in a spot where he's not even a second-team All-American. He's not included on ESPN's Top 100 at all. At all. I know 10 Alabama players made it, and you're being greedy at that point. But you feasibly cannot tell me that there are 10 players or that there's 100 players better than Chris Allen in college football right now. I can't believe you. Maybe there's a tad bit of bias there, but when you like really actually watch the guy play, it's not a reality that exists. There's a handful of edge rushers better than him. A handful. And one just so happens to be on his team. One happens to be in Oregon. There's a couple in Georgia. And outside of that, it ain't there. He's left off of the Draft Network's top 100 draftable players this year, which they just released this morning. 6 players from Alabama on the top 100. However, it's only from the Alabama players are included from 6 with Evan Neal to 54 with Henry To'oTo'o. Nobody else is after Henry To'oTo'o from Alabama. You're telling me that the best draft-worthy player after Henry To'oTo'o, there's a gap of at least 46 players? I can't. I absolutely cannot. Josh Jobe wasn't even put on that thing, so I love the Draft Network, but I don't know what that's all about. But that's not a situation, not a reality that we live in. We may live in a society, but it ain't the one that everybody else is paying attention to. I know there's a lot of questions and concerns about Alabama from a national perspective, despite all the confidence that they're going to go out and do what they always do, which is win titles, which is win championships, right? But I'm not at all convinced that Chris Allen is not either a preseason All-American, at least on the second team, or one of the 100 best players in all of college football, regardless of where you look.
I mean, I have not seen the Draft Network's top 100 list or anything, so I don't know for a fact, but I did look at the ESPN one. We talked about this yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they had some G5 players. I'm not going to say G5 players are worse than Power 5, but I feel like they probably wanted to get them a little more representation because, you know, if the list was full of Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Clemson, Oregon,
then it'd be a real list.
It would be. Yes, it would be a real list. But, you know, I can't just say, why do you even care? It's just a list that someone made up, because then that kind of removes any point in talking about sports as a whole. But, like, you know, lists have human error.
They do. It's not about the list. It's about the overall lack of recognition for who Chris Allen is as a football player, and the lists just are the example to that.
I agree. He's way too good not to be on the list. I mean, maybe he's 101.
I'm not one to sit and whine about who belongs on a list and who's not. I acknowledge who's there and you know, put my 250 words in for an article and go on about my day. Like, they're just lists for conversation's sake. And it's not about him being excluded from those lists specifically. It's about the fact that he is one of the 5 or 6 best players on Alabama's football team, and he's not recognized as such. I mean, once you get past Evan Neal, Will Anderson, Josh Jobe, and Bryce Young, and John Mechie, and Christian Harris, like, you start to run out of names that are legitimately, arguably, like a better athlete or a better football player based off of their own position or a better contributor to this football team. You start to run out of names. And I mean, there's a lot of good football players on this team. Don't get me wrong. It's just Chris Allen is one of the best on the football team, one of the best players on the best football team in college football, as determined by the AP poll and the coaches poll and everybody else. And yet we don't acknowledge that in any given way, outside of him being one of the 7 players announced as, you know, on the watch list for the Senior Bowl, which whoop-de-doo, like, he's not getting the respect. And listen, I get it. He could shut out all that noise by going out and having a double-digit sack season and once again leading the SEC in tackles for loss and all those different sorts of things. But at the same time, it's going to be very difficult for him to do anything without, but Will Anderson. And that's not fair to Chris Allen.
Not at all.
Because a lot of Will Anderson last year was, but Chris Allen. Right. And maybe not on the same scale, because the first time you saw Will Anderson make a play in that Missouri game, you knew he was going to be an all-timer at Alabama. It was just blatantly obvious. The way that he plays is tenacious. It's not something that exists in college football today. You can joke all you want, Brian. It's a reality that he's the best player on the football team, Brian. I mean, what else do you want from me? It's the fact, though, is that there's a lot of things Will Anderson probably would not be able to do had it not been for Chris Allen's ability to lock down the other side. Because Will Anderson, as Nick Saban kind of alluded to over the weekend, has evolved into a player that doesn't just play the run on the way to the quarterback, but understands his run fits now and understands his responsibilities and his role within the defense. He had a lot of freedom last year, despite being a freshman, because of COVID and all the other things that kind of held back his developmental process from a mental standpoint, which isn't a knock on him. It's the situation, because Chris Allen already understands all those things. That's the difference.
I mean, you say it better yourself. He's going to go out. He's going to have a good, Chris is. He's going to go out and have a really good season. I think, like you said, that he's going to have double-digit sacks. I think he's going to have a lot of tackles for loss. And he's going to go prove these preseason lists wrong. Yesterday, you talked about how much you hate preseason top 25s. And there's a reason. They're just talking points. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter until he goes out on the field against Miami on September 4th.
Oh, and Saban hates him too. And
yeah,
like I hate.
We all hate them because they're stupid.
Yeah,
I mean, half of those teams probably won't even finish in the final top 25.
But regardless, it's at least something to make a point when it comes to what Chris, because that's all it is for me. Like I said, I don't like him. I don't care about him. It's just the fact that Chris Allen deserves more, because he is an incredible pass rusher. He is an incredible edge defender. And like, to sit here and acknowledge all that and then be like, oh, well, hopefully he can play well enough to be a second-round pick. That's baloney. That's baloney. Why can't he be a first-round pick? He's got the size. He's got the ability. He's got the intelligence and the experience. Consistent improvement over a 3-year career so far, and now a fourth to close it down and to help this team go out and repeat as national champions and help with the development of one of the best pass rushers the SEC's seen since Derek Thomas. Not comparing Will Anderson to Derek Thomas. I'm not a fool. But like, the perspective of it, Will Anderson plays a part in all of that. And Chris Allen plays a part in all of that. And it should be recognized. That's all I'm saying.